Welcome back to Qtronics, and today guys, the definitive guide to modding the Switch V1 and V2. Now yes, I've done previous guides on this, but today we're going to go through the full thing, taking it apart from the very start right to the very end and finally seeing that screen and putting it back together. Now, just before we head into that, I will be timestamping everything, so if there's a certain part you want to see, you can go down into the description, click the timestamp and see that part. Anyway, before we get into it, I have some giveaway news for a Switch OLED, so I'll pass you over to Pasty. So, sorry to interrupt your regular viewing of me, but we've got a message from our sponsors, and that's right, our sponsor is, well, it's me, obviously, because who else is sponsoring me? Anyway, when I got to 1,000 subscribers, I did give away a Nintendo Switch Lite modded, that was a Pokemon version, to Jorgen. And basically, it's come to that time of the year again where I'm ready to do a giveaway. So I'm on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So what will I be giving away when I get there? I'll be giving away this Nintendo Switch OLED. Now, I will be modding it when it's due to go, and I will be doing that as the Kamikaze mod. So I'll do a whole video on that. But yeah, there it is. Obviously, it's used, so there will be some blemishes and stuff. But again, it's a competition win, and it will be modded, so you can do what you want with it. And just to add to the deal here, it's boxed as well, so you'll get the nice little box display thing, whatever you want to, you know, people like boxes, what can I say? Anyway, I will be modding it, but I won't be doing any software, there'll be nothing installed, that'll be down to yourselves to do, I'm not messing with that. So obviously if you do want a chance of winning this, firstly I need to get past 2,000 subscribers, so you'll need to subscribe, and then once we get there, I'll drop a video with all the information and stuff. So yeah, if you're interested, subscribe to the channel, and I'll hand you back over to your regular viewing. Right, see you in a minute. Right then, you're back guys. So first of all, let's go over the mod chips that you can get for the V1 and the V2. So as you can see here, we've got a mod chip, and now if you've got a V1, this is your only option, but luckily for you, this is the best option anyway. I will show you the V2 one in a second, but anyway, let's just go over what the V1 one does here. So this is the actual Picofly here, and basically this attaches to the EMMC of the V1, and then here this is the CPU chip which has some MOSFETs on it, and basically this fits onto the V1 as the V1 capacitors are in a different orientation compared to the V2. So basically if you've got a V1, buy this model. There's no point in buying any of the other models, it's absolutely silly. Now if we have a look at the V2 options, we actually have the same thing except the ribbon cable is different, and as you can see these pins here now are vertical rather than horizontal, and again 2 MOSFETs, or you have the option of this chip. Now this one is based on the Instinct V6S, and basically typically you'll get one of these ones if the mod chip supports all 3 models. Now for me, if you're doing lots of installs, this one can be a great choice because again it'll work in all 3 consoles, well all 3 versions should I say, but when it comes to the V2 it's much harder to install because you've got to solder every single one of the points on here. As you can see, you've got to solder every single one of those little dots on here to get this working, and then you've got to solder the CPU ribbon. Whereas the one I suggest, which is this one, you only have to solder 2 points on, and if for some crazy reason the mod chip fails, you've only got to buy this part again, unclip it from this connection here, change it out, and it's really quick and easy to do. So once you've got this part installed into the CPU, this is a doddle. So yeah, if you're going to do a V1 or a V2, get this mod chip, it makes it really easy, and at the end of the day, that's the point, right? You want to mod your console as quickly and as efficient as possible, only soldering onto points you actually need to. So yeah, that's that guys. So yeah, that's it guys when it comes to doing the actual mod chip part. Right then, let's get onto the Switch. Right then, let's take apart the Switch. Now, taking apart the Switch is actually really easy. We have 2 Phillips screws on the top. We have 1 Phillips screw on the top, 2 on the bottom, and then we also have to take out the middle screw in both sides of here. And then we also have 2 tri-wing screws here. So first thing we do when we take the Switch apart is you want to check and make sure there are no SD cards in here. And as you can see there isn't, and also there's a screw here, so that's the other Phillips one. So let's get this taken apart. So firstly we'll get the tri-wing screws off, and now we want to use a Y00 is what I normally use for tri-wings. Now, you want to put a little bit of force down on these and then turn. You don't want to put too much because you will strip them. And then once they're done, you can take them away and move them over here. And then the other one is in this corner here. And now these are the only two tri-wing screws in the console, so they're nice and easy to deal with. Next, it's on to the Phillips screws. Now, I tend to use a 000, but a 00 can also work with these. So first things first, let's get the one out of here. Now this screw is actually really small, as you can see, so you'll know which one goes back into there. And then we have the one on the top here. Now these screws can strip really easily, and basically when you come to tighten them afterwards, they just won't tighten down. So be really gentle with them, only put as much force on as you actually need to do. Again, we'll check for game cards as well while we're up here, and there's none. And then we have the two bottom ones. Again, same sort of thing. They're really tiny, they're only really just to hold the frame semi in place. So we take both of those out. And then finally, for this, we only need the middle screw out. And then we should be able to pry around the body and start to break this off. Now, this switch has probably been opened before because that came off really easily. But anyway, all you want to do is poke a little spludge around, or your fingernails or whatever, and you'll hear it start to pop off. You want to be nice and gentle with it. There's a little seal here, so if you can get your fingers into it. Oh, apologies guys. I'm thinking of the Switch V2, the Switch OLED, sorry. We have two more screws at the top here, two more tri-wings. And then there you go, it pops off nice and easy. So yeah, don't forget those top two screws there. As you can see, it pops off nice and easy then. Just give it a little bit of a wiggle. And there we go, the back of the console is off. Now, when it comes to this part of the console, we have several screws to go through. Firstly, we have the SD card reader, which has a screw in, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws to take off after that. So basically, you want to go all the way around taking them off. All the screws are the same size, so you don't have anything to worry about. So let's whip them off. Now, once we've undone this screw on the SD card reader, we want to be careful now, because the way this attaches is it's just pushed down onto pins. So if we lift up, and then you want to pry from the bottom and just pull up ever so slightly, and as you can see, this just pushes into the board. So if I give you a close-up of that on the camera, it just pushes into there. Now later on I will show you something to do with this in case there's issues. So while we've got the soldering iron out, I'll jump over to here and I'll show you what we can do. Right then, with that done, we should now be able to pop off the RF shield, assuming I've got all of the screws, which I haven't. I couldn't see that one down there then. Right, we pop off the heat shield, and then we're good. Now, this thermal paste here, we will clean it off, but it's typically alright. I mean, in this instance though, actually, it's spread all the way around, so it probably needs to clean anyway. So for this, if we get some cotton buds, we can just wipe it all off. So if we literally just scoop it off with the cotton bud. Don't put any IPA in it yet, there's no need. This stuff has gone quite dry. I don't know how old this switch is, but it doesn't hurt to put new thermal paste on. It's quite cheap. So yeah, there we go. That's done. We'll clean it up at the end when we get the IPA out. And then next onto the switch. So again, if we just clean up the pipe, doesn't matter if you get this perfect, you just want to get enough off that when we put the new thermal paste on, we get a good coverage. Right, that's that done then. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to disconnect this battery down here. Now I'm using ceramic tweezers, but anything plastic will be fine. We just want to go underneath it and pop up. So before you do anything else, make sure you disconnect this battery, as we don't want any shorts running through the board. Right, so next we have to disassemble the console. Now, you can fully take out the motherboard, but honestly, the fact we only need to solder 2 points, it feels really redundant nowadays to do this. So the most we want to do is the 3 screws around the CPU heatsink. So, and then for the 2 pieces of foam here and here, I would suggest basically put a little bit of IPA on them and then just poke them off. If they get a bit damaged, it's not the end of the world. You can always buy some more foam, but I've never seen anyone complain that the foam is ripped. Honestly, I've never had an issue with having a bit of ripped foam. So once that's had a little bit of time to settle, we should be able to poke it up. So first things first, if we just nudge this back and forward, we just nudge the heatsink back and forward, we should be able to start to pry it up. You want to be nice and careful with this. Again, as this console's been, not open for since it was done, that can be a bit tricky. But yeah, just get under there. Use your fingers. Don't use any prying tools. You want it to be as gentle as possible. And then with this, I tend to just poke it a little bit until it comes off. Again, if you don't get a clean one, it's not the end of the world. If you want to be super duper clean on here, you can use some heat. But again, I think the value of it, there you go. Like I said, a bit of scraping does the job, it's not ripped. And then on the back of this heatsink will be some thermal paste. Now, this is basically bone dry. So let's get it cleaned off and we will be applying new stuff here. Yeah, it's completely dry. We can use some IPA on this in a bit if we want to clean it off. Again, while we've got the IPA here, let's give it a bit of a clean. So I'm just going to drop on it. We want to be careful now with the IPA though, because we don't want to get any in the LCD. And then the last part before we get to the scope is taking off the MMC. Now, the way this is attached is this part here is pushed down into the board, a bit like how the SD card reader works, and the rest of it is attached to a heat shield. So what we want to do is get your fingernail underneath there, or your finger, or a spludger, just pull up ever so slightly, and then the whole thing should pop off. And as you can see there, it's attached the exact same as the SD card reader, so you want to be very careful with these pins. Now, for the moment, we can put the switch away, and we want to get this off here. Now, it's glued on, so you don't want to just pull it because you will damage this shield. So what the best thing to do is if we push it just a little bit to create a gap, and then if we stick some IPA in it, give it a few moments, the IPA should weaken the glue, and then it's much easier to pop off. So again, just let it, a bit of IPA soak into it. IPA won't damage the MNC, so just let it soak in there for a second, and then we should be able to just pop it off. There you go, popped off nice and easy. We can put that to one side. We might as well pull the rest of the glue off the board, and then put the MMC to one side for a bit, because we're going to need that in a bit. Right then, if we bring the switch back, we can put this heat shield back on here now, and then jobs are good. And underneath here is the Wi-Fi IC, so we don't want to do any damage to that if we can help it. And there we go. Right, the next part now is we need to get this heat shield off. So I'm going to get to the scope, and we'll have a look at how the best way to get that off is that I've found. Right, I'll catch you in a second. So, right then guys, we're at the scope now. So for the next part, we need to get the heat shield off. So the best way I've found to do this is basically around the CPU heat shield is lots of these little clips here. So if you get something like a sewing needle or some really sharp tweezers, if you basically poke your tweezers into the hole, and you basically want to bend forward ever so slightly, you want to be really careful because you don't want to scratch the board. You just want to bend it forward enough to make it pop out of the hole like that. And then basically what we need to do is go all the way around the board and do the same to every hole. So here's another one here. So again, we just get our tweezers in. Again, normally I wouldn't do this under the scope, so if you're doing this at home, you can probably just do it without the scope. So now we have all this lovely thermal paste here, so we're going to get that cleaned off. We also have thermal paste on this part, which we'll clean off at the end when we come back to it. So we get another cotton swab. Now it's important to get all of the thermal paste off this part. One, we're going to put new thermal paste on, and two, when we're soldering, thermal paste conducts heat really well. Obviously that's the point of it in the first place. So if we've got thermal paste around the caps we need to solder to, which are down here, we could put too much heat onto them or spread them onto further caps and maybe knock the caps while we're soldering, which we don't want to do. So what we'll do is I'll put a bit of IPA down here, and then what I tend to do is get a little toothbrush, obviously not the one you're using for your teeth, and just give it a little bit of a scrub just to get in between. Right, that's good enough. Obviously if you want to be like really anal about it, you can probably get the tweezers in and just scrape any excess off, but that'll be fine. Right, there we go then. So when it comes to soldering, what we're basically going to end up soldering onto is these two caps here. Now this is a V2 board because the caps are horizontal. If you had a V1 board, the caps would be vertical. I will get my editor to throw up an image of what that would look like for you, but basically we just want to solder onto these two. Now I find when I'm soldering onto this gets in the way for me. So the best way I've found to undo these is to get your tweezers, and if you position it there and push in, and position it there and push in, and then get both ends at the same time, you can normally make these just pop. There you go. You can find the two holes that the speaker wires are in, and then this normally will just pop out for you. Again, much more difficult on camera, weirdly. There you go, and then that's out the way. You can just bend that over here a little bit. Obviously be careful because that's your speaker wire, but just gives you that extra bit of clearance on it. Now, I mentioned earlier on about the SD card reader, so let's go and have a look at that. Obviously I'll timestamp this as well. So this is where the SD card reader attaches. Now over time these pins can become loose, so while you're here it's worth just checking, make sure none of these pins are loose. Just poke them at the bottom and you'll see if any of the bottoms are loose, you'll see. And it's a nice easy soldering job to get them sorted if they are. Let's swap to the other side. Where are we? And again, we'll just poke, give them a quick test. If they are loose, these are really easy to do. All you do is just get your iron, bit of flux, just touch them, and they'll all solder back in place. All these are absolutely fine. Now, just to clarify, the top part will move a little bit, but the bottom part is what you're looking at. So yeah, these are all good, so we don't need to do anything there. So we can actually get on to soldering on the CPU chip now. Right, so just before we solder onto these points here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the actual ohms reading of these caps is. So if you do solder it and you get a different reading, you'll see the issue. So if we have 1 point on ground, which is my black lead, and we have the red lead, obviously I'll get my multimeter popped up for you. So on the left side, we should be seeing around 10, I believe it is. So as you can see, oh, hang on, am I not touching ground here? Sorry. The left side should be an open line. So you want to see basically nothing on here. So 0.4 is what mine's saying. And then the right side here, this should be somewhere between 10 and 20. So at the moment, this is 16.9. And now when we move to the other side, this inside one here on the left, that should be the same. So around that 17, 18 on this board, but anywhere between 10 and 20. And then the left side of this should be ground. There you go, 0.6. Now, interestingly, when you're soldering, if you accidentally solder to this part, this cap here, these two join them, it doesn't matter because this is also ground, as you can see. So there you go. Basically, that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to get the chip soldered. So I'm going to get the ribbon soldered on, and we'll check those resistor values at the end again. Right then, the ribbon. So where does this go? Basically, we have this thing here. We drop it in, and we want these little bits here to go underneath, and then we want this bit here to be underneath here. So if we drop it into place, roughly, you'll see what I mean. And now we want to make sure that we're on to these two pins here. And if you pull up here, you'll see that the ribbon, if done right, will have all the other capacitors in the right way. So now sometimes these do get a bit bent up. So what you might want to do is just give it a bit of a flatten, bit of a pinch together. Again, it's copper running through here, so you want to be a bit careful. But basically, they can get a bit twisted up in the packet and stuff. So all you want to do is just straighten it out somewhat. Right, there we go. So you want to line it up, and then if you poke it with the tweezers, you can normally get it to kind of conform to it a little bit. Tight on that one there. So you want to just make sure you push this down around. Again, not all of these ribbons will do this. Some of them will have a wider gap and it'll be fine. But with that one, you just want to make sure we can actually get a good connection onto that side, especially as this side here is the side that we need that connection from, because this is the positive, right? Okay then. So next thing's next, we actually get to the soldering. Now, for this particular board, we need two soldering tips. We need a big tip, and that's purely to solder these ground points in. And then we need a fine tip to solder on to these. And as you can see, that tip there is almost as big as the actual capacitors. So when you're soldering here, you've got to be really careful not to get this on. Let me just double check, 'cause I think that actually isn't my thinnest soldering iron. That is my thinnest single point. You can get ones like this that are angled, but I think for this particular task, you don't need an angled one. So you've got two choices here. You can solder your ground pads on first and then solder these on, or you can solder your other bits on first. Now, typically, I like to solder these bits on first and then come back to the ground afterwards, because once these are on, you know, we've got the position that we want. This ribbon's a little bit bent, unfortunately. So I'm going to get these points soldered on first. So soldering on for me, I'm probably going to come in around 350. Now, you want to be quick here, because if you're not, you will take the actual chip off the board. Well, the capacitor, I should say. So I'm going to heat up my iron. And like I said, I'm going to come in at 350 to start with. Now I'm just going to tilt this a little bit to make it a bit easier for my angle. So what you want to do is a bit of flux on these points. And if you knock it, just put it back in place and you're all good. Now, I tend to actually pre-tin my iron when I do these. Now, I've seen other people not do it that way, but I like to do it that way. So I'm going to pre-tin my iron and then apply some solder. So there's a bit of solder on my iron now, and then we want to come in and just tin the pad to start with. Now, I've bridged that there, because my iron's probably not hot enough for this. So I'm going to go up to 380, because again, we're using a fine tip here. And then I'm going to come and do the other side. Now, there's probably not enough flux on this for some reason. So if we just apply a bit more flux, again, it doesn't matter if we bridge. I will double check that in a second now, because I think I might have bridged across the cap. So we'll have a look at that in a second. Then we'll do the other side. Don't know why I'm a little bit shaky tonight, but I am. There we go, that looks all right. I will take that point, obviously, as I just said. Now, again, normally I don't bridge these, so I'm very shocked I've actually bridged it tonight. And that's annoyed me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. But, as, again, I already mentioned, it doesn't matter with that side of the thing, 'cause it's already ground. I'm just cleaning up the flux a little bit. And now that looks absolutely fine. I will put a little bit of flux on there, see if I can stop that bridge from happening. Just because it's annoying me that it's happened. But again, the key here is don't panic. There's no need to panic. There you go, bridge is gone, and those soldering points look absolutely beautiful now. Right, we can turn the iron off for a second to change tips while we clean up that little bit. Now be careful here, because we don't want to pull the pads or anything, because we would pull the cap straight off the board. We will clean this up with some IPA in a minute. I just wanted to see how that was done. Now, if we go back to the multimeter and we can check the readings and see if we're all good. So the multimeter's back in ohms mode and we can measure again now. So black lead on ground, and this left side should be basically 0. Again, we're seeing 1.2 there. Now that could just be because the board's a bit hot. Yeah, you can see it's dropping now. And then the other side should be 17 if I remember right. There you go, 16.4. Again, we're hot, so as things cool down, they go up and down. And then the left side here should be that same value. There you go, 17.2, and if you come back over here, 16.7, and then this side here should be ground. And it is. Let me just double check I'm on the right ground here, because I might be touching my lead. Let's try this again. So left side. There we go, much better. I'm getting much better reading now. And then here, 15.6, this side, 15.5. Again, they're now joined, as you can see. And then this side should be ground. Perfect. That's all good. We're done with that now. So the only part we need to do with soldering is just to solder on these 2 ground points. So once your iron's cooled down, in my case, it's nearly cool, we can change to that bigger tip. Again, we want lots of heat because these are big ground planes. Now, the key here is we don't want to put too much solder on that this whole top rail is covered, because then the heat sink won't sit on properly and won't get enough heat away from the CPU. So all we want to do is put enough solder on that this pad and the bottom of this rail basically are connected. There we go. Now we can turn our iron off and we're done with the iron. That's it. That's all the soldering we need to do. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clean this off. So what we can do now is use some IPA, because we're actually done with the bit we needed. Right, now we can get some IPA and actually clean this off. So you've got 2 options. I recently found these Kimtech wipes, and they actually were on a video by NanoFix, I think it is. And these are brilliant. Or you can just use some cotton bud and some IPA. I'm going to use these because these tend to wick away the flux really well. So pop it on the board, a bit of IPA and a brush. And this tends to get away all of that fluxy stuff really nicely. There we go, nice and clean, look at that, absolutely beautiful. Perfect. Right then, for the next bit, we're going to head away from the scope because we no longer need it because we're done with all the scope stuff, and we'll get back to the main camera. So we'll catch you in a moment. Right then, so we're back over to the switch now, obviously away from the scope. So first things first, we need to plug this speaker back in, and that should be nice and easy. Just lift it up, and push it back into the hole that it came out of. And in classic Happy Gilmore fashion, why doesn't it want to go home? Why won't you go home, ball? So just mess about with that until you get it in. Some tweezers might help. Poke that back in. Click. Right, we're in with that. So next, if we zoom all the way in here, what we need to do is basically, these points here now, the solder blobs will be higher than the caps just by the nature of what we've done. So what we need to do is get some Kapton tape across this bit here. Now, you can buy all sorts of Kapton tape, just cut some down to size. I've got this really thin one, as you can see, and this fits perfectly. You don't want to cover the die, so whatever you do with your Kapton tape, just make sure it's the right size. You don't want to cover any of the die. There we go, that's nice and done. So next things next is we actually come back to the heatsink. So firstly, let's get it cleaned off. Now we're going to use a bit of IPA on this because we want this to be as clean as possible. Next is we need to do a little bit of a jiggery pokey to this. So if we come here, you can see here at the moment now, we have this little tab here. So if we were to put the heatsink back down now, it would actually cut this wire. So if you look where this is on the camera, you can see it runs across basically this pin here. It basically runs across this pin here to this pin here. So if we take that off, I'll show you that on here. So basically, if I can get this to... So we want to basically, where that would normally lock in, if we bend that bit there, we should be good. So with your fingernails or anything, just bend the lock back. And the one next to it here, look. Now, when you put the heat shield back down now, you'll see that that now is bent around it. If I get you some extra light here, you'll see now that we're bent around it and nothing's catching. So, next thing I would do while we're here is the actual EMMC part. So if we bring back the EMMC, what we need to do now is connect that to the mod chip. Now basically all we do is this bit here connects to that bit there. We just pop that in like so. Again, harder to do on camera than it is in real life. Squeeze and you'll feel it pop in, and that's it. Now, I like to cover this actually with some Kapton tape. It's completely down to you, just because the way this will sit is like this, and the EMMC will technically sit on top of this shield here, like this. Now, in theory, there's a chance for it to short, so I prefer to just wrap it in Kapton tape, so that's what we're going to do. So I've got some thicker Kapton tape, and all I'm going to do is just put some over the chip, bend it round, just to basically make it so we don't get any shorts, and I'll do the other side as well. And there you go, we're all sorted. Now, this bit here we can still see, and this sits next to the heatsink, so I would definitely make sure you put some more over this corner here. So I'm going to put one more piece on. So there we go, nice and done. Right then, back to the switch, and basically this part now will live on here where the EMMC went originally. So the way this works is this bit here actually connects into this bit here. Now this is the way, this is the face up, so if you bend it back on yourself a little bit and then connect it in, you don't want to put too much pressure on it again because you don't want to rip any of the pads. But if you basically push it into here and then lock it down, and then we're good. and then we can push this now down like this, and then make sure this lines up and push it into place. Okay then, and that's it. The mod chip is installed. So what we can do now to test that it works is if we zoom out again, if we reconnect the battery, again we'll turn this off as soon as we tested it's worked because we haven't got the heatsink on. Reconnect the battery. If we press the power button now, we should start to see some life. Now as you can see down here, this light's glowing. Okay, green light, and there we go. No SD card, all done. So let's get it put back together now. So first of all, press the power button, it will turn off, and then we want to disconnect this battery again. Again, ceramic tweezers, pop it off, boom. So next, onto thermal paste. Now I'm using Arctic Cool MX4. It's just the one I suggest, guys. You can get MX6, but it's probably overkill for a switch. So first things first, if we zoom back in, we want a nice jizzle of thermal paste on this die. So open up your thermal paste, use your teeth like the caveman you are, and then we want to put a nice jizzle of thermal paste on here. And that is probably all we need. As we squash it down, that'll be enough to cover it. So basically, we're done with this part of the switch now. So we can bring the heat shield back, pop it underneath here, pop it on in place, and then we push down in all the corners, and we're good. That's it. That is the mod chip installed and onto the board. So all we need to do now is fully reassemble the switch. So first things first, we have the heatsink. So again, using a Philips 000, we're going to reapply the heatsink. Now we need another jizzle of thermal paste here, and basically want to go down across this heatsink. And that should be more than enough there. And then with the heatsink, firstly, we want to make sure we put it in this way first, because this part is actually edged. So if we get it under the back here, and then we can lower it down. And this is where that bit I mentioned earlier on about now. So this mod chip here sits really close to the heatsink, as you can see. So if you don't cover this part here in thermal paste, there's a chance that when you're pushing it back down now, you can get it stuck in there, and one of the caps that we saw in this corner could touch this and basically short out to ground. So by putting that Captain tape there, we mitigate that chance of ever shorting out. Right, we push it down, and then we can put our 3 Phillips screws back in. So, and you'll feel them go tight. And that is basically it when it comes to putting the internals of the switch apart. That's all you needed to take out. That's done now. So we'll get on to the heat shield. Now, what you want to do is, if you remember, there was thermal paste on here. So let's get a thermal jizzle on there. Again, you don't need lots and lots. This is just an extra bit of thermal paste now. All this does is attach to the RF shield and gives you a tiny bit more thermal release, but it's not massive when it comes to this part. So let's bring back the heat shield. Now, with the V1s and the V2s, we have an issue where this part of the heat shield actually dips in, as you can see, so we need to cut it. So the best way I've found to cut this is basically we want to cut just shy of this screw hole here, so we can still screw it down and it stays shut. We want to cut just shy of here, and then it's basically just on the edge here. So if we put that down, you should see there's the screw hole. So we want to cut along here and just shy of this screw. So let's do that. Again, take too little off to start with, because you can always take more off, but you can't put any of your heat shield back on, right? Or any of your RF shield back on, I should say. Right, so you want to literally come straight up there and avoid that screw hole if you can. There we go. And then straight up here. And then we can do a little check and make sure we're in a good place. And look at that. absolutely perfect. So now what we need to do before we do anything else is we need to reconnect the battery. Boom. We might as well do a quick test to make sure we're still happy. And hopefully it's powering on. Did I press the button? I did now. There you go, green, no SD card. Right, we can turn that off. And now we have to leave the battery plugged in because we need to fit the heat shield. So if we zoom out a bit, it's time to fit the heat shield. So heat shield just drops in place, like so, with our lovely cutout. Make sure you push it down, apply the foam paste here, and we want to get our screws all screwed in apart from this one in this corner, because that's what holds the SD card reader in. So let's do all the other screws first. And right, now it's on to the SD card reader. Now I hate putting these back on. They're so fiddly. So the best thing I can say is you basically need to angle it so you can get into here and clip this back in. It's really fiddly and it's really hard to show on camera, but as you can see, those two things line up and then you'll kind of it's really bloody awkward. If anyone has an easier way of doing this, let me know in the comments. Okay, that's in. You'll feel it go in. And then fold that down, get your screwdriver and screw in the final silver screw. Boom. That's it. That's all the internals done. Job is a good one. Right, let's get the back plate. So for the back plate, we just want to plop it on, and if you push all around, you'll feel it start to click into place. Now you'll see here, this bit of heat shield always bends as you cut it. So don't be worried if it feels like it's not clipping back together fully. Now, the way I get around that is the first screws I put back in are the tri-wing screws because they're the bigger ones and they can hold a bit more force. So if we go back to that 000 tri-wing and we get the big long tri-wing screws, you'll see the difference because they're quite long, and we can screw those in. Again, you don't want to swing on these, just you'll feel when they get tight, but tri-wing screws for me can strip easy. Okay, that's all the tri-wing screws in. Next, if we do the two side screws, so back to that Phillips 000, and the side screws, you'll see which the difference is because they're quite thick. So if we get onto the side of the switch again, so again, get all these screws in first because the little screws, as I mentioned at the start, can strip really easy. Finally, it's onto the little screws. Now, with these, sometimes I find they're not magnetic and sometimes they are, so just be careful with them. And then we want to screw in, and then this one, it's all about just applying enough force till it stops. That's it. You saw how quick that went in. Any more than that and you will strip the screw immediately. It's like cheese basically. Cheesy plastic. And again, with this one, give it a squeeze because again, there's that part of the board that's pushing out here. There we go. And then the final one of these screws, and then we have one more screw left to go. See there, sometimes they feel magnetic and sometimes they don't. It's a weird one. There we go. And then the final screw is under the kickstand, which is rubbish, and it's that tiny little kind of half screw, as I call it, and we just put that in there. And there we go. That is all of the screws down. If we turn this switch on now and I take away my big bright lights, we should hopefully be happy. And there we go. no SD card, exactly what we want to see. So there you go, guys. There is one more thing I do want to test, just to prove it's working. I'll get in a Cat A on a memory stick and we'll see it boot up into that. So give me 2 seconds. Right then, guys, I've got my memory card in there, so let's see it boot to a Cat A. There we go, jobs are good, and if you have a look at the console info, it's always interesting. What EMMC do we have in here? Ho ho, we have a Samsung one. So if you don't know, the Samsung EMMCs are faster than the SK Hynix ones and they glitch quicker. So we can turn that off now, and we have one final test. Let's make sure the original firmware also boots. So if we power it on, we'll see our no SD card, 2 top buttons. And then there you go, the Nintendo logo. And we should boot lovely into the Switch original firmware. There we go. Oh, I didn't get any volume there, but I think that's just because the volume was all the way down. Yeah, we're good. Right then, let's turn this off. So there you go, guys. That's the definitive guide to doing a V1 and a V2. Yes, I did make a few mistakes with the screws at the start. It's again because each switch is ever so slightly different. But the fundamentals are, this is the easiest one to mod. And as you can see, it's 2 solder points. And I even showed you check the SD card reader if that had gone wrong. So there you go, guys. Let me know in the comments any questions or anything you have on the mods. So do let me know in the comments, guys, any questions or any tips to help me actually improve on this. If you think that I could have some tips on this, do let me know. And as I mentioned already, if you do want a chance at winning that Switch OLED, assuming I've not hit 2,000 subscribers yet and already given it away, don't forget to subscribe and like. And obviously, I'll be giving that away once I hit 2,000 subscribers. And as I've already done giveaways before, the odds are I will continue to do giveaways as time goes on. So thank you very much, and I'll catch you later.